Hello. Now we've begun again. Welcome back to the fourth and final session of what has been, for me personally, a very thrilling series of readings and talks and conversations. We have four readers this evening. Marina Temkina and Ariel Reznikov, who will be zooming in from New Jersey and Jerusalem, respectively. And then Adeena, Karasick, and Matvei Yankelevich will read. They're both here in the room. Maybe now is the time to start saying more things about how this began and what this is, but also it doesn't quite feel like it yet. So I won't yet. But I will say that I'm super excited to listen to our first reader, Marina Temkina, who was born in Leningrad and received her MA in history, emigrated from the former Soviet Union in 1978 and settled in New York a year after. In the U.S., Temkina worked as a translator in refugee resettlement agencies, interviewed Holocaust survivors for the Shoah Foundation, and co-organized the Oral History Archive for Jewish Immigrant Culture. Currently, she works as a psychotherapist. Temkina's poetry books were published in Russian by Syntax in Paris, France, by Slovo Word in New York, and by NLO in Moscow, Russia. Her book in English from Ugly Duckling Press, What Do You Want?, consists mostly of concrete poetry installations. Temkina won the public art project, You Are My Solar Energy, for the 2nd Street Station, Bergen-Hudson Light Rail in Hoboken, New Jersey. She published 3 artist books in collaboration with her partner, French artist Michel Girard. Together, they collaborate on international visual art exhibitions. It's a great pleasure and privilege to welcome Marina Temkina.
And thank you also, Lewis, for inviting me. And I cherish our letters. And also thank you, Mike, for answering my silly questions, and Laura for updating us on time. I will read 2 poems, both written about 10 years ago, and then a series of poems, 15 very short poems, entitled Boys Fight. So the first poem, the title is Error. At the beginning. This is how she liked to begin her poems. At the beginning, she made terrible mistakes in English. Freud would love them, but I just think that it wasn't a sexual frustration, but a usual linguistic anguish of a new immigrant. She once went to the fruit and vegetable store in Kew Gardens, Queens, where she lived then, to buy a bunch of dill. And she asked the Korean man, the owner of the store, if he had a dick. She meant dill, the basic herb in her country of birth. The man was young and stared at her, and then he said, "Yes, I do." "Can you please show me where the dick is?" she asked politely. His face became rather perplexed, then gradually red, and he said, "What do you really mean?" She lost hope that he will understand her English, and went through the store and found dill and paid him. And much later, she discovered that this basic herb of her native cuisine was practically unknown in France, in their very sophisticated cooking. And again, we can make many spelling mistakes, among them sexually provocative, such as cooking and cuckooing and so forth. This Frenchman had a name for a dill, a female name, Annette, but we did not know the taste of it. How misogynist was it, she thought. She used to make these mistakes. She was completely retarded then as a new immigrant. Once she said to the people who donated to her family a set of red suede chairs from the 60s, the museum pieces, instead of drive safely, she said to them gratefully, safe drively. And the next poem is called Yom Kippur and is dedicated to my son. Yom Kippur. Darling, come. I will read you a book, a tale with golden fish or golden rooster. Rich and poor love gold. I did not know this when I lived in Russia, and it lasted for a decade or so. I loved books and other things, superfluous and useless, that helped hide from people loneliness and loss. Nobody read you the Mother Goose or Winnie the Pooh in English. Immigration is hard for children. Promising you a journey in a mode of epic travelers in modernist interpretation, who were I? Was I insane? For some time we can say it was a journey, a family epic turned to Homeric laughter, loud, enraged, of grotesque distortions, with scary faces, shaking lips, not in a stage of a conversation about what happened. So many things happened. One thing I know what happens when a lonely girl becomes a mother. She gets a companion for a while that she treats as she knows best. Was it too close to you or too distant? Was it too hard to live in two worlds, two climate zones, cold and hot? Love needs money. You know this invention of a wheel. Even love, even death. This does not heal easy, not healing at all. Long trips left us no time to say goodbye to our city. Let's say goodbye now. Life is now, you know. Life is now. And then Boys Fight is going to be an artist book, and I can show you a little bit of these drawings. These drawings, 15 drawings, are taken from the origin of them is the French dictionary Larousse that my husband, who is a child of the war, he spent his early childhood in occupied Paris. And this dictionary was his dictionary as a child and still is. In this book, there are male games like box and Tai Chi and so forth. Boys fight. They are always fighting. I don't like this sentence. I should rewrite it. Big boys are always fighting for spaces, territories, trophies, and pleasures. They fight physically, intellectually, sexually, creatively, financially, and in all other possible ways. They fight with each other, big boys. That is what I don't like about them. Is this my ego speaking or my feelings? At the very beginning of time, they fight as cavemen. So what do? They worship sun and they fight. Sun goes up and sun goes down, who knows why. They fight no matter what, time of a day or season of the year. Even though they love sun, and they really do, let's say. That is what Nietzsche thinks about Zarathustrians. Even then they fight. Sun loves them too, these big boys. Sun brings them light, warmth, food, and more. Nevertheless, they fight. Hey, big boys, when are you going to learn how to stop fighting and give back and keep peace? Do they listen to me? Do they listen to anybody? No, they're busy fighting now. They fight. Boys fight in America, in Africa, in Asia, and in Europe. They fight actually in both Americans, North and South. For different reasons and things, it's true. But they fight even in Alaska. Hey boys, isn't it too cold there to fight? And in Australia, where winters are summers and summers are winters, and all seems to be upside down, and they fight even there. Boys fight in my country, and in your country, and in all countries in the world. And if a country is an island, big boys fight even there. The world is a huge fighting ring, an enormous battlefield, an unlimited war zone. Now even cosmos is turning into a competitive environment for fighting. Oh boy. Small boys, big boys, they fight. They love energy, more speed, more cars, more gas, more oil, more property, more yachts, more trips, and more hunting. They fight, and we get less water, less grass, less trees, less forest, less air, and less love. Boys fight and get more energy from fighting, for more fighting. They love cosmos and its universal energy. They love other planets and energy of other planets. For them, Earth has limited land, limited UC for fighting. Big boys, they need more space for fighting, including cosmos. And cosmos is extending and enlarging by itself. And this is a good news for big boys. Big boys fight to compete, and competition is their favorite game, their sport. They like to be athletic, to be first, best, the sexiest, the smartest, the most inventive and gifted. They like to be the most inspirational for other boys. So other boys, the little and the big, would also fight in their own terms. Just wait. Big boys love to be the most eloquent, the more clever, the wisest, the most desired, the best dressed, needed, wanted, accepted, supported, and loved. What is interesting about big boys is that they fight just for that, no matter how good or bad they are. They think that fighting helps to achieve what they want. And this is the best way of achieving what they desire. Big boys, they love to be in the center of attention as movie stars, as rock stars, as athletes, as mainstream boys, and to do those in three-piece suits with briefcases. And they fight to become golden boys, simply meaning with solid, solvent bank accounts and the old boys' assets. And again, I'm telling you, no matter how good or bad they are, these big boys, sometimes they have energy for social change that is against their fathers. I mean a positive change, hopefully for better. But this does not always happen how we expect or hope for. I also mean a personal change, individual, collective, political, private, and public. They fight for some kind of change, I believe. Big boys, they train themselves and they practice, work out, go to the gym, work hard, make efforts, they do not give up. They live as if they are at war all the time, including the war against the passage of time. And there is no way they could be defeated, and there is no way they could win. Big boys, they make their life difficult, often for nothing really. I think that big boys sometimes make good examples even for girls, if they are good big boys. But that may make girls' life difficult. And by the way, when the girls' life was easy, tell me, as a result, girls also learn how to fight. Big boys are difficult to fight with. They are our bosses, our teachers, our fathers, grandfathers, our brothers, brothers-in-law, our uncles, neighbors, policemen, our cultural icons, our generals, our presidents, and our judges. Big boys are our heritage, our monetary inheritance, our tough legacy, and our emotional and behavioral burden. Who could tell me where it all goes? Big boys fight. They try, this is how they grow, and this is how they mature. They also try to discuss, to negotiate, to collaborate, to work as a team, accept the other, compromise, share, and exchange. Nevertheless, they also fight. What I mean, simply speaking, is that boys fight defensively and often aggressively, and sometimes even sadistically. And this is a mental illness that might be healed or not. It can be healed by only if big boys become conscious about their defenses in their own lives and in the whole world. Remember, big boys fight. Why do I write about that? Don't I know from birth that they fight and how? Do I still want another world? As if I'm myself an infantile fighter, an oppositional teenager, or a failed public intellectual who tried to resist those boys? Do I want to stop the Achilles raging attacks so I could stroke him and calm him down? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marina. Thank you so much. That was amazing. I'm going to, maybe I want to say one thing very quickly, which is an interesting passage through which this weekend came to pass was that Laura Solomon and I took a very long drive in April of 2019 from Pittsburgh in Pennsylvania to Milwaukee here in Wisconsin. And it was on that drive that we had spoken about the idea of a weekend like this before. It was on that drive that we basically planned out what has happened here this weekend, the panels and readings. Yeah. So I don't know why this is important to relay, but it feels like I've never quite planned an event on a road trip before, and then been standing at the event several years later. So it feels significant somehow. Our next reader coming up is Ariel Reznikov. I don't know if Ariel can hear me yet, but it's probably very late at night for Ariel, I would guess. Ariel's most recent works include the poetry collection Unnatural Bird Migrator, and with Jerome Rothenberg, the translingual epistolary collaboration A Paradise of Hearing. He's an editor at Jacket 2, and a co-founding editor of the Materialist Press. Ariel has taught courses on translingual writing and multilingual diasporic literatures at the Center for Programs in Contemporary Writing at UPenn and at Bina, the Jewish Movement for Social Change. With Stephen Ross, he is at work on the first critical English translation of Michael Licht's Yiddish modernist long poem, Processions. And with Riv Weinstock and Lilach Lachman, he is translating into English Avot Yeshurun's selected Hebrew writings. In 2019, Ariel received his PhD in comparative literature and literary theory from the University of Pennsylvania, and he's currently a Fulbright postdoctoral U.S. scholar. I am so happy that Ari is here with us, and yeah, it's such a pleasure to welcome him. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Lewis. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah, all good? Okay, such a great pleasure to be here. It is indeed 3:30 in the morning here, so I'm in a sort of a strange zone. It's like, definitely very late at night here. And I loved hearing that reading. Thank you so much. Absolutely fascinating, beautiful work. Just want to say thank you to Lewis and to Laura and to Woodland Pattern for organizing this. Great panels, great readings, and just an honor to be a part of it. I'm just going to read 3 poems. So the first is the first section of a longer work that I'm in the midst of called Firepoint. And I just want to show you, because we were talking about alphabetics on our panel, and one thing that's always been interesting to me is that what we think of as the Hebrew alphabet was not originally the Hebrew alphabet, as such. That is, the Hebrew alphabet that we have today, the Aleph Bet, that's the Jewish Aramaic of Babylonia. Before that alphabet, the Hebrew canon was written in Proto-Canaanite, which is a completely different alphabet. So the whole canon was translated in the first exile to Babylonia. So the reason I say that is I'm just going to show you. I can't share my screen, never mind. But I was going to show you that in this new work, I've been using actually Proto-Canaanite alphabetics in certain moments. But you won't be able to register that in hearing it, but someday, soon actually, it will probably come out and you'll see it. So, and the only other thing to say about this piece, this first piece, is it's called Firepoint. The piece is dedicated to a colonymist, Kalman Shapira, who was the Rebbe of the Warsaw Ghetto and a distant relative. And the piece is separated into 4 parts: shards, seeds, kvitlich, pintelefeiden. And I'm going to read shards right now to you. And I should just say there are going to be some words that come up that may not be immediately understandable because they come from other languages, but this seems like the right crowd. And I just wanted to say that kvitlich, which is an important term here, are little tiny notes in Yiddish. A kvittel is a note like one would put into the Western Wall, if anyone's ever seen people put these tiny notes into the Western Wall. But traditionally, before that practice, they were laid on graves. Or perhaps, no, I think obviously the laying on the graves would have come from putting in the Western Wall. But Hasidic practitioners will lay these tiny notes on the graves of Hasidic mystics and leaders. So when you visit the grave, oftentimes, instead of flowers, there's piles of notes. That's what a kvittel is, and that's what kvitlich are. So Firepoint for colonymist Kalman Shapira, shards. Plants and shards in the graves of my desk, recites in broken prayer, in garbled curse or blessing, disremembered, only backward, recites a poem in air, from fire or burning nest in stow of lazarette, not every necessity there was met with poetry. Though every shard shines multiplicitous in arm's length grows, branches of light not to see by but to behold, a process we witness in growls and whispers. The sea awakens, the streams shot through toward infinite horizons. They look back and look forward, then side to side, Yoram says. They are fire points, I say, Pintelefiden, pointing fires, tiny, non-consuming pyres, burning in the deeps of the sea. Helit says to meet her at Gnazim, to see what she's gathering, writing, covering every shard. Oh, holy, blaspheming, translingual grapholalia asks to bring a photo of whatever Ksav Yad caught my eye. And Helit sends back with a manuscript saying he should have the thing itself and not only a photograph. Oh, what's left when now's so long forgone, and the now I don't have when the ancestors are gone and only the poems remain. Tiny notes flood pages, disparate, dissonant, unending translations, a line tried on every side. Kfitlich piles, not messages to God, but to the inheritors, messages in language's core, knuckles of cactus, clusters of awful, disharmonious residues, threaded songs, planting seeds in atlal, in ashes, remains of long nights, fires now extinguished, in Hasidic amnesic memory and temporary dwelling at the foot of those hills there, pointing, shtetl and Bedouin camp, the ass and camel, that same sharp dust, same and not same, eyes doubling cross, crooked, echoic crux at cusp's edge, acoustic leak, gasping lines, grasping no thing. Sign in electricity, sign in the act of poetry, no sign at all. No, we don't have no sign at all. A way, if not to die, as translation doesn't, nor language, not dead, never, never, despite the millions murdered or expelled. The shards leave in unplantable seeds, errant, archipelagic, spectral creolization, even as the ground below transforms into firmament. Earth's records overwhelming, good the world's large, and I can walk. May not be thrown after, but burned or buried, buried in desk or burned between fires. Seeds, plants, in cracks, rift, teeth, hammer nails, notate in sounds from eviscerated language shells, forgetting nothing. The sounds hang on like flies to fly paper. The sounds dictate the sound. Tried and tried to transcribe, never grew tired, exhausted beyond words. Oh, what's left when the ancestors left, when the ancestors gone, what will they leave us? Never left, says, threading between lines. Never leave and are ever looking on us. The shards plant seeds in future earth, and this is it. The notes that come after Yom Kippur's end, after opening, closing. The next piece I'm going to read is, Lewis mentioned this, a chapbook that I did with Jerome Rothenberg called A Paradise of Hearing. This wonderful imprint in Philadelphia, The Swan, put this out. And what it is, for years, Jerry and I have been writing back and forth in this sort of translingual hodgepodge between Yiddish and English, sometimes, back and forth, in the same email many times between languages, and certainly in exchanges going back and forth a lot between Yiddish and English. And we were asked by Bob Holman at some point to contribute to this anthology of New York poetry outside of English, which was a kind of a funny ask for us since we're both technically English language poets. But we decided to write this poem in our sort of hodgepodge. And then what we decided to do in this hodgepodge, or this translingual mixedness, is to translate the poem both ways. So we made an English version and a Yiddish version. And so it's a bilingual poem, but it would be impossible to say what language it began in. It began in both languages. So I'm going to read that poem, and I'm just going to read one bit of the Yiddish for you so you can get just the sound. I love actually the Yiddish even more than the English, but it would make less sense to read the Yiddish right now and more sense to read the English. So A Paradise of Hearing. And it begins with an epigraph from this poet Michal Licht, a Yiddish contemporary and friend of Zukowski's and Resnikoff's. A Lied, was hebt mit zwei Schures von Lichten, klettet in Geher Gan Eden, Otem Gehennem, auf die Leislich von dem Eus geträumtem Leite. That's Licht. So the subtitle of the poem is a poem beginning with 2 lines by Licht. Ascent to a paradise of hearing, breathe hell on the molding of the dreamt ladder. And here's just a little bit of the Yiddish from the poem. Wie Schmutz zwischen unsere Zehen, dem Geruf von Wärter, in Kaas und Nacket, Schmucks von die Gassen, von wannen sie kommen, wo neue und alte Sechures mir haben verkäuft, auf edle Zungen gespannt und eingeessigte in Fesseln, was mir trinkens erstens, treibt unsere Meulen, nur verfällt uns aufzustellen. Weitere Mal platzt auf dem Träum in Schattnis Geruch, Siedendicke, Treif. A paradise of hearing. Like dirt between our teeth, the smell of words, angry and bare, smacks of the streets they come from. Where new and old wares we sold out to genteel tongues, dried and pickled in casks, what we drink first taints our mouths but fails to raise us further once the dream explodes. In sharpness smells and boiling trafe, over noodles on the stove, and pork tongues prayer and catfish proverb carries, smell of distant holes and hovels, men in fur-trimmed hats and cracked galoshes, in pools of hot, cold bathing, babes emerge, toiveled and ruddy in muddy streets. Oh, little angels, arms slashed at the wrists, opening their jaws and craws. In klezmer chorus to what murder follows, 4 crows gather and glean with Gentile Zionist beaks, not dreamt, never, never far from any home can confess to. In the star-struck fabled town, the first, the last shy gets alive, surviving in basement attics on leaves of jargon alone, with nowhere out but the sky. I too, and you, in late or latter-day imaginings to make a new, supreme, surreal, and lonely only Jewish vaudeville. The archipelago actors we cast in red string across a chain-link stage, their teeth and tongues wading in mad Galician mud, bought wholesale onto 2nd Avenue West, and world of cafeterias and stinking fish heads, scratchy records bouncing on their scratchy phonographs, from which the ancestors fled, leaving a residue behind. And I'm just going to end with a very new translation. I like lately to read things that are really new because it sort of shakes things up, especially at 3:50 in the morning. And this will be the last thing I read. It's called Ish Holech, in English, A Man Walks, and it's by deeply Kabbalistic Mizrahi, meaning Jewish Arab, Iraqi Jewish Arab poet who lives now in Israel, in Beersheba, and who's the inheritor. Her name is Chaviva Padaya. She herself is a Kabbalist, a contemporary Kabbalist. She's the inheritor of one of the most important dynasties of Kabbalah from Iraq. Her grandfather and great-grandfather were two of the most important Kabbalists and children of Kabbalists. And she's also a major feminist and reads Kabbalah through feminism, amazing writer and poet. So this is a new translation, A Man Walks by Chaviva Padaya, and it's translated by myself and by my partner, Riv Weinstock. It's dedicated to Subhi Hadidi, who's a Syrian critic and translator and political thinker. A man walks from Damascus to Paris. If through a tunnel he passed or cut air, this I wouldn't know. Suddenly I saw the West is wandering, and there's no middle pillar that doesn't shake. I walked a distance of years from Jerusalem to Beersheba and didn't make traveling bundles, like Ezekiel who lies on his side on a bed in Babel, 365 days, and his beloved dead, and Zion in exile. Abraham walked from Beersheba to Moriah, 3 days tying and untying his sons in his thoughts, 3 days slaughtering and crying, still we're tied and untying. Who are the slaughterers and criers? Who the slaughterers laughing? Here everybody's walking, and already there are those who went ahead and walked here to the city of the dead. Is that where we're walking? And if I want to be etched out from within the graves here, until when will there be nothing except life running backward, face of mask and face of me? If I were a man imprisoned in a woman, if I were a prayer in tight sentences, if the hills of Jerusalem were the deserts of Beersheba, I've walked many deserts and never arrived at Moriah. Now I feel in my homeland, suddenly I understand the land, how much she moves, her trembling, how uncomfortable. And amongst my brothers I am lost. And there are some who go from Iraq to America, and some from Lebanon to Nicosia, and some from Israel to Palestine, and some from Israel to Israel to Israel to Israel, and don't find anything because Israel in Israel is missing. You who wanted to be free in your home, make for yourself a bundle. There's no one free in the world who wasn't expelled. Am I not a girl? Am I not a woman expelled from a man? And there's no mother and no father. Am I not a person banished from words, removed but not in exile, rather in my land, in my nation, buried but not in the desert, rather my coffin's unnecessary, exile but not at a distance, rather in this dust that captures blood and tears within itself and is choking. A man goes up and up, if in tears, if in vodka, this I wouldn't know. Will it always be this way in the East, wind or earth? Meanwhile, I prefer to dwell inside a word. Another home doesn't yet exist, doubtful if it ever did. Within my Hebrewness, my blindness, my Arabness. For this is music only played. My lips move, but my voice is not heard. For this is the language in which the greats cursed and loved. I was removed from her in order to be ransomed. Hebrew, speak Hebrew. Now, nevertheless, the East is screaming. Thank you.
Thank you, Ari. Thank you so much. Our next reader this evening is Adeena Karasick, a New York-based Canadian poet, performer, cultural theorist, media artist, and author of 12 books of poetry and poetics. Her Kabbalistically inflected, urban Jewish feminist mashups have been described as electricity in language by Nicole Brossard, proto-ecstatic jet-propulsive word torsion by George Quasha, noted for their cross-fertilization of punning and knowing, theater and theory by Charles Bernstein. Recent publications include Checking In and Salome, Woman of Valor, the libretto for her spoken word opera. Karasick teaches literature and critical theory for the Humanities and Media Studies Department of Pratt Institute and is poetry editor for Explorations in Media Ecology. She's a 2021 Andrew W. Mellon Foundation Award recipient and winner of the Voce Donna Italia Award for her contributions to feminist thinking. The Adeena Karasick Archives established its Special Collections, Simon Fraser University. It's been such a pleasure to hang out with Adeena this weekend and to have her here to perform. Thank you, Adeena.
Thank you so much, Lewis, and everybody at the Bindery and at Woodland Pattern. I can't tell you, I'm verklempt. Just to be with my Yiddish mishpacha in such a environment and to follow, Ariel is exquisite reading is such an honor. So I'm going to read from a variety of things, and I'm going to start with, in honor of our post-pandemic opening and the fact that many of us can all be here in person and celebrate, and also how Jewishness is a language of opening, I give you uv, openings. And it starts with an epigraph by Derrida. I always dream of a pen that would be a syringe. When the opening is a promise, opening, opining, pierce, polis, pulsing, policies, policing, open, upana, open, opening, abin, openan, afenan, as opening is so often off and on, pending, penning, opaeon, to disclose, reveal, become manifest, exposed. As of 2202, 422 million worldwide have been exposed. Let the walls open, the bridges, borders, bastions, and bodies open, sores, core, scores of terrifying silences open, the thousand darknesses of murderous speech opening, opening. The streets are opening, gates, eyelids, shadows, measures, cities, machines, foundations, chains, roads, and relations, ideological sedimentation. The field is opening, the night is opening, opening, the pen, the pun, the pulse, the paean, the pan, opening, sick fictions, dictions, dichotomies, definitions, contractions, extractions, opening, parentheses, indices, hypotheses, the letter is opening, opening to what constant reader whose open wardrobe, what cold open of which open sea, whose open mic just open, my head and the high windows open, this day, this door, this open house of whispered scream, scroll, struggle open, the space of emergence, my mouth, your legs open, these idioms opening up and toward the open air, our arrows on we audible in the mouth, aching, arc, seek, soak, seize, spray semantics, open the light and lick, rim, slit, wet were opening through rock, cleave, C-span, sprecht, fist, sense, opening in the gloaming. Openings, a happening, a hopening, ipening, opening, a ripening, enacting bodies, borders, lungs, tongues, fissures, follies, valleys, volleys, values, upending, pending, suspending, expending, pandering, meandering, the openings, an event, a rupture and a redoubling, excess and an excess of excess anguishes, fragilities, agilities, a series of speculative negotiations carrying all possible futures within it. That was just an excerpt. It's actually coming out as a book designed by Warren Lehrer, the great designer. Okay, this next piece is for the fabulous Toronto-based Yiddishist Michael Wex. It's a coda to a piece in my previous book called Here Today, Gone Gemara. And this is called Talmudic Blues. Set the lexicon to the dialect like an idiom. Sometimes this poem feels like it's not the brightest candle in the menorah, that it was behind the door when the brains were being given out, that it operates like a wise person at night. And even though it's all popped up and pressed with polemical discord, producing itself through performative memory and politics, establishing its own force and affect of lived and embodied agency, like a messy Baba Misa, it's wearing its Talmudic lenses, waving its big yichus, and groaning under the weight of its reference. And though it's schlepping its mental furniture, sometimes it's doing so not well, feels like it's lying in the ground, brokering Babel, hacking its china, saying some of these words are also of blessed memory. And may all of your truths fall out but one, and may it ache fiercely. This poem is a translingual, spliced, polysemic, undead dybic, all transubstantiated with highly transmittable accents and inflections, super spreading its radical necessity, saying it's also operating within a zombie economy and is complicit in its own undoing. And if you don't mind me saying so, these letters look good for their age, all dressed up to be messed up, are dropping their load, have a burden to bear, and all framboise fair and shake it up, ramshackled and shuckling says, "Juby, juby, joo." It's a chewy jamboree, a jazzed up juiceria, and like no stupa, before the chuppah says, "Don't eat it before you read it." For it is said, sometimes the poem grows like an onion, and sometimes I wish it a sweet death. A truck filled with sugar should run over it. 'Cause in these troubled times, this poem is spritzing like a Boschen Binde, drowning in hard gloving in anti-semantic wipes, crying out between Clorox and a hard place. And like a fake Yiddishist in the house by you, chutzpah dick, a gefiltered kerfuffle, all vermished in the verkackte flourish of all that's new, moistish and varnished, hot God, yeah. He is reminding us that like the Magid of Mezrich, it's got a big tish. And despite its strapped-on, borscht-belted /skirt swerve slips, still doesn't have what to wear. And says, "Blessed be she who dwells within the letters, for sometimes the letters rule over her, and sometimes she rules over the letters, cleaving to the light of infinite possibility." But it won't buy you common sense. As I always say, the letter is matter, which moves matter. And in the wonder of our discontent, these words are closer than they appear. And say, "Fly me by night to the river, derive, oive, over the rainbow. Fly me faster than angels, so fly, as a fly flying without wings, as sparks fly entourage. I was born to fly, so fly with me through the flux of form, through refueled folly, volley, veils, while vole, rivae, all luminous and voluminous, free flight and fly, flug me by the seat of my palms. Fly me as a butterfly fly, as flamingos flying the coop, fly free and fly blind, buttressed from the inside as a flying fuck over the moon, through the dateline as the sky flies awake. Okay. I'm going to now just read some excerpts from Salome. And as I spoke about it a little bit earlier, and not to say too much because I know I have a time, but basically this whole project, which became a spoken word opera and a CD and a book and was translated into Italian and Bengali, and it explores the apocryphal myth through a feminist Jewish lens, basically reclaiming her from a history of subjugation and misrepresentation and reinscribing her not as a nubile murderess or a seductress, but rather kind of a freedom fighter, and installing her back into a rightful history within Jewish royalty and rabbinic lineage. Try to find that in what I'm going to read right now. Thank God. through the verkackte gugstock and hagstackers of antiquity, trickery, lexical, flickering Salome. You are bringing in the big guns, opening your sluice gates with your hypodramatic excess flexed with swishy riffs, pithy spiff grifters, like a Schattenbach Schatten show, like a feisty zeitgeist, a forever Riviera, and I say, ooh la lily hillbilly bill bombas to hum dilly la bruha hoo ha slaptrap of schismatic revisionism, and take your fixie pixity prurient lure at twirly whirl as a contra tom tempestuous sextembody, and lay me down in an elixir mixer of lexically robust postulates sensei ce soir, bête noire of gnarly parlors, a coughing cacophony of acrostic biscuits, a miscued skew, a super cinder slippery silly singing in the flotsam frayed refrain. Stay out of the, here, I'll just tell you, I'll give you a little, something to hang on to. Okay, so this next piece is, basically between John the Baptist's baptismal waters and Salome's mikvah. They're drowning in love. Out of the darkness, sans soleil, Salome. Out of the madness, Lilameus nights, drenched with martyred ardor. Drown me in your silted stanza, saint stain sante of sap to spirit. Drown me in the surf of waters, of hallowed self waters, of swiveled misery, fetid despair, asylum waters, of ravaged labyrinth, scorched screams, smashed orbits waters, of moaning filth, sprout, sip, sprig, thickets, feverish reveries, drowning in the silk steam curtains, corridors of more stone slab fingers, fleshy revenance in the waters of roused dawn. And so, Salome, she had a dance of the seven veils, or she danced the dance. So the question is, why seven? A shadow scream, masked in the fury of decay. Yes, I will, yes, say yes, I will dance in a courant, bumpy, vampy, nymphy symphony in a prodious emporium of morbid dysphoria. I will dance. 7 words in the first verse of Torah, 7 days, weeks, counting the Omer, sitting, Shiva, shaking, 7 species, 7 directions in the world visited by 7 guests of the Sukkah, 7 by 7 hand breaths and dance, 7 circles on Simchas Torah as the bride circles a groom, 7 times called to the Torah, 7 Noahide laws, notes, seas, spirits, stars, 7 days of cleanliness, of preparation for the construction of the Mishkan in the desert, and wind the tefillin 7 times, binding yourself to the law, 7 days of plagues, of prayer, 7 cows and tossocks of grain, 7 levels of heaven, continents and spherot, 7 sparks of light, 7 gates of entry for 7 female prophets. And on Yom Kippur, the high priest sprinkled the blood in the temple 7 times. And through 7 veils, chariots, heavens, and throne rooms, 7 palaces, seals in ascents through the 7 waters of high walls and the halls of the unseen. You will find me along the path of the letters, ripe with the conspiratorial architecture of moist reverence. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Adeena. Closing out our 2 days of programming, we welcome Matvei Yankelevich to read. I do want to say again how astonishing this has been in my experience these last 2 days, just to be with you all, to listen to these conversations, to be able to, I suppose, repeat these conversations in the energy of this space. Also at the Bindery, which is such a beautiful space, has been remarkable. And I'll say more thank yous at the very end. But now I'd like to welcome Matvei, who is a poet, a translator, an editor, whose publications include Some Worlds for Dr. Voigt, Alpha Donut, Boris by the Sea, Today I Wrote Nothing, the selected writings of Danielle Harms, and most recently the chapbooks for From a Winter Notebook and Dead Winter. In the 90s, he co-founded Ugly Duckling Press, where he produced a variety of books, chapbooks, periodicals, and broadsides, co-edited 6x6 magazine, and curated the Eastern European Poets series. He teaches translation and book arts at Columbia University School of the Arts, and is now also, that's on his bio, the editor of, what's the name of the press, Matvei? Do you now edit? You're now the editor of a press. Oh, yeah, World Poetry Books. And Matvei is now the editor of World Poetry Books as well. No, it's such a pleasure. I should also say Matvei gave me great help as well in organizing this event. I often leaned on his advice and guidance for it. I'm very grateful to it. Anyway, it's such a pleasure to welcome Matvei.
Thank you. Wow. First, I have to say, that's an impossible act to follow. So I'm not following that act. And thank you, Lewis, for including me in the program. I'm glad you did, because, yeah, we talked about it a lot, and I would have felt really bad, I guess, if you hadn't. Thank you, Laura and Jenny, as always, for your warm welcome at Woodland Pattern, and everybody at Woodland Pattern, Peter, Alexa, Marla, who has done the most amazing job with this metaverse, bringing us into the 21st century single-handedly, pretty much. So thank you, and thank you, Michael, for the logistics brain, and Zach for hosting us here at this beautiful bindery, and Lewis for your perseverance with this idea, and all the people who are here and who are joining from afar. It's great to be here with friends, both Milwaukeeans and those of us coming from both other places in the U.S. and also other similar histories back in the from before we got off the boat. Anyway, so I also thank you all for coming. I know that for a lot of us, probably most of us have family histories that in some way lead through parts of Eastern Europe, which are now experiencing nearly apocalyptic or biblical scale sieges and so forth, and loss of human life. And it's hard to turn one's attention to poetry in this moment. And maybe, who knows what it's worth, but I'm happy that you have all decided to do that, readers and listeners. So I should have probably written that out because I didn't say that very well, but it's hard not to say something about that. And now I'm discombobulated. So I'm going to read from, what's that? Oh, my mask. Oh, see how discombobulated? Did you hear anything I said just now? I was kind of wondering the silence of, okay, so thank you, Adeena. Okay, so I'm going to read a few old things and then new work, and I'm going to set the time. This is from a book called Boris by the Sea. Boris was thirsty, so he watered his plants. When the plants died from being overwatered, Boris was still thirsty. Boris had no more plants to water, so he watered the sand that was left. The water sat in the sand and went nowhere. Boris was still thirsty. Boris went outside and watered the sea while no one was looking. The sea waved and nodded and waved again, but Boris was even thirstier, and the sea was no different for it. Boris had no water left. He rolled in the sand and became dirty. Boris wasn't sure where he was going. For a moment, he thought that he was in the middle of a sentence. The next minute, he found himself walking down an empty street. Just then, he was not trampled, barely, by a harnessed mare pulling along a crumbling carriage. Suddenly, Boris became very old, and wise, too. But then, as it happens some of the time with old and wise men, Boris fell over dead. At this point, the story comes to a point, and that point is too narrow for the story to pass through. Boris sat on the floor thinking about the past. I have written a lot of things now, thought Boris, and there is still one thing I have not figured out. Boris thought about what that thing could be. Then he understood what he could not understand. I have not figured out, he said to himself, what words have to do with it. And I'll risk reading another old poem. This is from the very Kabbalistically titled Alpha Donut. Published by incredible Jewish New York School writer and publisher Lewis Warsh on United Artists some time ago, 10 years ago. This is called Buttons. This text is written on buttons so tightly sewn to each other that no one can read it. Clarify. This text is written on the inside side of many buttons, all of which are sewn together in a necklace of buttons so that you can't even see the text. In fact, the beaded and contiguous nature of these buttons makes it impossible to even know which side of each button is its inside side. In the necklace of buttons, sides don't matter. Every side touches is in contact. Even so, the text is written only on the inside side. The side which was once in contact with was touching the clothing people wore, the clothing of the people who once wore it but now do not wear the clothing because it does not have buttons. During the war, all the buttons fell off. Those that didn't fall off were cut from the clothing of the people. No, the buttons no longer touch the clothing. Instead, they touch each other on all sides. Buttons have two sides and two sides only. At least these buttons. No one can read this text. It's on the buttons, and the buttons touch, and so there's no room for an eye to get in there in between the buttons. No, the buttons holes don't help either. They're stuffed with thread, the thread that keeps the buttons touching. These buttons are a sort of entertainment, you might say. Their holes are full of thread, their sides touch. Not even imaginary characters can read the text, not even a thought experiment. Boris can't read it, even if I asked him to. Benita Canova can't read it, nor can Nietzsche. The hysteric one can't, and the ontological one too. The buttons are so close together, you can't even unbutton them. You can't even imagine them. These are real buttons. These are real buttons. My friends can't read the buttons, and you, I don't even know my friends, because on the one side they are my friends, and on another there's somebody else's friend. Yours, maybe. Their own, definitely. Imaginary, perhaps. Yes. Buttons. The buttons. I've never been so afraid of buttons. Okay, oh boy. I'm going to try to read some newer stuff, and I will preface it. It's all from one 8-year series now that's still going, so who knows, who cares how long. And it's called From a Winter Notebook, or at least preliminarily that is the title of this long cycle. I recently came across this book by Palestinian-American writer Noor al-Sadir. It's a book published in the UK. I think it's still in print. It just published a few years ago, called Fourth Person Singular. And there's a passage in it that resonated with me in terms of some of the concerns of this, or that I've slowly, because I'm very slow, come to think of as concerns of this cycle as I'm trying to figure it out, what I'm doing. So I'll just read this paragraph from Noor al-Sadir. But if you are an endless chain of metonymic displacements, then what am I? That self that organizes around thinking of you. And why is it that writing a lyric poem that has an I that matches up with the person I consider myself to be in everyday life induces shame? How can the I of a poem, also a chain of metonymic displacements, maintain the same multiplicity as you, resist adopting a fiction of a singular voice, have the intimate quality of a notebook without the intimate content, become the position or mouthpiece through which the world rather than an individual speaks? I'm really interested in especially the you and I part of this and the notebook part of it, although this notebook, this winter notebook that I'm working with, has lots of intimate content, and that's actually an important part of its shame. And but this bit of writing really, I think, positions something about how I'm trying to think about these lyric poems. And I'm going to read some new ones and then some older ones in reverse, kind of. For sake of wrestling life from knowledge, who hasn't pressed their thighs against another's thighs under a table at a dive bar, as mountains call that forlorn name, Domal, to echo mountains' open line of air? A mood that demands to be moved by song. But words gum up the works, wax seal of night. Convenience, but a lesser form of greed. The story's publishable, persuasive, but barely truth, nor artifice, nor life. An immigrant translation turned away, not open, not entirely, but when imperfect strangers take my breath, keep it, you're mistaken, the pleasure is all yours. Pull the plug on infinite expansion so that tomorrow must become the past, no time for coffee, let alone breakfast. Come Monday morning, dry around the mouth, hard to tell what's hunger and what's winter. The neighborhood has changed. I live a floor above another tax bracket. I take the staircase 1,000 steps at once to fly past envy to derision. Their clothes are pressed, breathe easy, and still time for daddy's business as plan B, smooth shoulders. Sketch the dog, hire a walker. A bumpy road, a back rub. A house on a hill in poor taste, I gather by prime cardboard boxes nestled to their warming door. But who am I? Unable to relieve corn syrup suffering of convenience stores where I've acquired cheap this arrogance that's tailored to the poorly dressed, and uncle with a villa I've not been to, where swallows plait the dusk light in coiffed evening dress, care where words take me. Tardy to appointments, my worn-out souls like pickup trucks on gravel, only earth remembers when the mortgage comes due south of comfort. Dependent on their market for safety's wave-torn net, I've signed away my rights against their law. Their psychic battle overwhelms me on swept streets. In print, economists preach futures I won't reap. In farce of uplift, nations weep while I persist at my syllabic rattling and scratch at blue holes in the air where air should be. Help me forget their world and come the fuck over already. Fourth floor, the last door on the left, where records spin on Earth's wasp-waisted axis. Their melody breaks sense and few words reach me as at my window winter whirls around dead leaves. This last enjoyment, though I don't deserve it, in days of endings coming after endings, I enjoy as words, and as words only. Wine, notebook, cigarette. There is ashtray. This we did get right, but little else, despite our books, our telescopes, our beakers bubbling, computations quicker than the questions, our compasses and fearsome expeditions. Here, finally, we are come to long impasse. No library holds answers better than this crust of bread, this final rind sucked dry. Not shaped for summer in this breathing world, how did I lose it before gaining any more words to roll around the mouth till sun's set? What word rolls better off the block than head? How's mouth without us to mouth it? Tongue without its slips, lists, dictionaries of doing better, adrift in sloth, in infinite undoing. I'd look at anything too long, if granted sight again, even the horror of my fingers losing grip of glass, write letters post-restant if there were stamps enough and carriers, cry tears if there were music in the sense I mean and knew, as old men cry now and then to songs their parents danced. Who is this last display consoling? What mind will know to make of this a form, this mess of expiration? And what is breath for now, if not to aspirate words' ends like death? Under last breath, my name, the way you'd said it, in war-wreathed winters of our discontent. That's okay. I might only have time for the new ones. Okay. Imagine that I do what is essential only. Walk past a church or subsidized commuter homes, past children reaping joy from movement of their bodies in this pink light gone puce of early setting sun. Voices from the roof fall to the ground. They're human. They may lack personhood, but their timbre holds accounts, and class is as if augured in the wind, emblazoned as a crest upon their cadence. Shadow creeping over me, is it you? Whose key is in my lock? My friends, my mostly smiling sound bites, bluntly tapping quick-fire news year in, year out upon the screen that fades to crystalline true silence when inactive. I've seen your cursor flashing next to mine. And if I took these poems to the livid street in mad abandon, in stockinged feet, half naked, you'd sign the affidavit for the state to take possession of my will, or vouch for me and tell me in a letter, soon luck will turn, keep scribbling on what lunar scraps are given. I pluck my eyebrows one by one to play the part,
Pray curtain opens on the depth of winter. Enter, exeunt omni. The Bedouins watch woman in the dunes and break out laughing. Is there nothing more to trespass now that all property is private? Nowhere to be alone, mine ore of stones by hand to mediate lost souls. Dogs at their work of barking at the wild impossible of passing worlds. Wine in my head, the night in morning's light, the hills too far to touch. Their sorrel haze floats off the chestnut fields below, blind in the mustard sun. Striped land, the mountains stripped. Postcards delayed till flagstones settle their accounts with sand. Jaws ache of eating my own head. Wild life passed me by. Youth I gave to paper. Not enough heat in the coffee to correct the clock. Poor pen, the implements, extensions of my hand, less grip than spider's hand-like body up the wall. I fall in place, in line, into the trace, and with my face turned toward the field of faces that reflect the sun, I am but one, observing, unobserved, unsaid, unknown, untouched, unwritten, unreflecting, light without machines or flowers, purpose, spider's web, unharnessed light, light wasted, spent on wander, spun into words. I'm here like winter come to summer. And I think I'll read, those are kind of, okay, I'll read a couple short ones. Winter comes calling while I'm on vacation. Autoresponder, etc. The book's not done. Mail piled like snow. Of a sudden, life looks brief. Just this mangled foam, this form for which you've spared no part. There might not be a chance to change or quit changing. My blue notebook's sad and modern. So if I write, the self is wispy, sure, but strike that line. They say you can't edit poetry, but I say, fuck it. Here the poet wrote all of midwinter day in that brick house, Main Street of Little Milltown in the mountains around the corner from the bookstore. Wood smoke in the air, low clouds, low-lying sun, caught up in lower branches like its lowered gaze, that bare melancholy of identification. Such long days are no longer long. Can a coal century bear its weight in wars and prose? Umbrish gardens of the twilight of the gods, these hills, these mansions turning downward at the lip. This is my house. I've lived in it, made love, looked out these windows, baked in the kitchen, misshaped love by feeding one lover's cake to another. Had I your hands, I'd give up my ambitions. What matters now that far away you think of nothing but what's close at hand? To win your pity, that it congrued to mercy, is my burden. To speak it burdens others. This posture gets the worst of me, the better, to walk your mile in my shoes and get nowhere. Somewhere winds a clock. I hear its grinding gears, its bells in empty tower of my chest. Say, ancestors, they'll sigh, all right. Drink until insight comes, or sleep. What's liquid must pour out, and vessel empty of what memories a friend to lend a hand, penitent, gloveless, sweeping snow from our last winter's windshield. It is winter, a way to begin, formless, not in a narrow notebook, narrow in light. Fat brown bug greets me at the door. Who knows how long it's been half dead, or full dead for that matter. Now from dustpan to flushing gutter, same as unplain can't. Mine this slant speech, saber of our commerce and its sword to ensure profit. I prefer it to pretending nature. Let it ring the more so as dom, dom, dom is home. Doomed bell calling us back from battle to same office of winter poems. And I'll read one last one. I'm very grateful to all of you for being here, and a pleasure to read with all and panel and talk with all of those here. It's winter, because the snow smells of gasoline, because of exhaust and exhaustion, because I want to paint and be free, because I've made it this far, because I'm ready for it. It's winter. It is winter because it took all year to edit this sentence. Because it's winter, and because I'm slipping, it's winter, so it's winter. And because by the time I take off my coat, whip off my winding scarf, remember of my vest, zip out, find a seat for a hat, untie and unlace and pull off the boots, grope the light, bear down on the notebook, note the warmth, grapple a pen to uncap it, the poem part of the poem is gone. Thank you again. Thank you, Lewis.
Thank you, Milwaukee.
So maybe I could ask if we could offer a round of applause to all of our readers, all of our panelists over this symposium, who've done such an amazing job and given so much. It's been such a pleasure. So if we could offer. If we could also offer applause to all the folks at Woodland Pattern, to Laura and Jenny, to Micah, Marla, to Peter and Alexa, and also to Zach at the Bindery. Thank you all so much for all the work you've put into this. It's been so amazing and so worth it and so appreciated. If you'll permit me this, I thought I would close out our Shabbos with a song. Over, I suppose, a period of like fall of 2019 till about through the first 6 months of the pandemic, I had a really deep dive into Hasidic music and was really researching a lot about various Hasidic melodies, and wrote a series of poems that was sort of encanted through Hasidic song. And so this one is called Give Us Something from the Dynasty of Vision. And it's just the one poem, that one song. Give us something from the dynasty of vision, even though a horn blew by our side, Even though a secret name beyond me was so close, we were only peripheral witnesses. Kids who need to know something more than the line, more than the infinite idea in a photo. She is held like a secret newborn by the lovers as they pose. His cane rooted into the beach sand, his hat on his cane. And because we all already know this and can repeat it, and because we all already know this and can repeat it, we feel pretty good right now. We'll never go back out there again, we tell ourselves. There's death outside. We rise to fix ourselves here on the wings of mirrors. Diddy-di-di-di, yai-bye-bye, diddy-di, yai-bye-bye, yai-bye-bye, diddy-di, yai-bye-bye-bye, yai-bye-bye-bye-bye-bye, yai-bye-bye-bye-bye, yai-bye-bye, yai-bye-bye-bye-bye. Our first letter will become our sixth letter, so the book shuts itself. All its mirrors are on the inside, and it would only be because of our friends that we can enter here at all. And it would only be because of our friends that we could enter here at all. We sing together, though we don't seem to know it. We sing together, though we don't seem to know it. We are composing the pseudo-last will and testament of a Western culture which has only ever been a passing off of what's made other through violence as one's own power, and which we sing has destroyed us all. Diddy-di-di-di, yai-bye-bye, diddy-di. Yai-bye-bye-bye, yai-bye-bye, diddy-di. Yai-bye-bye-bye, yai-bye-bye-bye-bye, yai-bye-bye-bye-bye, yai-bye.